Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So we just had a pretty substantial update to Warlock again, along with a very good preview update here with a bunch of quality of life improvements. So even if you're creating a new character here, you can easily get it kitted out for testing purposes. But we also have new on the Zen market, a companion choice pack, but it is a whopping 6,000 Zen and you only get to choose one of them, which feels a little bit odd. You do, however, get 270 companion upgrade tokens to go with it. So let's say you choose to go with Regis. You will at least be able to upgrade him to the maximum at Mythic with those 270 tokens, 120 plus 150. However, with the next module, we are getting Celestial Companions. So, in my opinion, they should have at least gave us another 175 tokens to get said companion to Celestial, but they're not. However, claiming a Mythic companion here will then give you enough tokens to be able to upgrade that one to Celestial with spare on top. The problem is, I don't see any of these worth that much of a price tag. The Blaspheme Assassin, yes, she's great. You're only going to use her as summoned, she's going to support the team a little bit, and she can deal some pretty decent single target damage. However, make sure to read that note, it's only after a certain amount of time when she can stack her bleeds up. Otherwise, she's probably around like rank 20, rank 30 in most cases. I personally wouldn't get her. Flapjack. That's not bad. 5% combat advantage, going to be very useful next module, more so than now, because the stat cap goes to 120%, but you can buy him for 4 million from the auction house right now, or open the lockbox that he dropped in. So again, I wouldn't get him just from this pack. Linulanarel. She's got useful amounts of healing. It's not that crazy. None of them are that great. And I definitely wouldn't pay that much for her. Regis, yes, sure. He's got great multi-target damage. One of the best. But honestly, even being the best, he's not great. Not great compared to what you can do with your own abilities. He's good for AFK farming, but that's about it. In most cases, you're just going to out damage your companions or even altogether because they're not as quick as you. You might just go to the group of enemies and pretty much one-shot them without your companion being able to do a single thing. Wolfgar can be somewhat useful, but again, I wouldn't pay much for him at all. Not worth it. Mage Slayer got some good single target damage, but he's melee. And again, not worth 6,000 Zen, even though you're getting 270 tokens with it. Same story with Etrine. You can probably buy her from the auction house pretty cheap. Celeste as well there. A bit of healing, but nothing crazy. The Owl, somewhat useful for the defense power, but not great as a damaging companion. And then the Ghost, somewhat useful for the offense power, but nah, you would use Batiri, Raptor, Neverwinter Knight, and then say Spine Devil as offensive powers as a damage dealer, not this. Even with the new stat caps, you can hit all of them while using a striker companion like I showed in a previous video. So I think the price of this is too high. Even with getting a 20% discount from coupon bags, it's not going to be worth it. You can of course take the gamble, especially if you have extra Zen, buy the pack, choose a companion that's selling for a decent amount, and then go and sell that one and maybe flip a profit by using the exchange. Now do note also the Halloween event is over. If you did choose the winning team, you would get a Visage selection choice pack. Let me guys know what team won, because I actually don't know. I didn't do the minimum participation to contribute to any team, so I can't even tell which team won. And there doesn't seem to be an option to say buy the Visage that did win, and there was no announcement from the devs of which team actually did win. The game should tell you somewhere. It should send you like a mail or something. But let's get into the preview updates. As I showed earlier, the Wondrous Bazaar has some significant improvements. You can now get all of these mount and companion choice packs to be able to just kit out your character with everything and test the things out. They also added these boon points, so you can now get maximum amount of boon points on your character to test out what it's like to have all of them, especially helpful for a character who say hasn't done all the campaigns and adventures yet. And yeah, there's much more, including rings to cap out your stats to give you a 50,000 item level, belt item to reset cooldowns and fill your action points, to grant combat advantage against enemies, and much more. It's great here on the preview test server. They definitely done a lot of work to make testing these things out nice and easy. So thank you devs for that. It's greatly appreciated. A lot of time saving with that. But let's get into the other changes. The devs posted some details, and here we have the combat advantage cap going to 120% instead of 100%. Previously, it allowed you to get higher upwards of 120%, but they were only benefiting from 100%. Additionally, debuffs like vulnerability and dulled senses, which should allow you to get above the cap by reducing the enemy's defensive stats, weren't working. Now they actually do. I've tested dulled senses and it works. You can see the damage values there and they match what we're seeing here when we test. I checked dulled senses as well with 120% combat advantage and like minus 19% awareness with the buffer already, and we can see that worked as well. The math adding up and contributing to increasing your damage above that 120% cap. I also went and checked with vulnerability, reducing the enemy's critical avoidance below 19% while we're at 120% crit severity. So that all checks out as well to work. So it will still be the best to have support in your team using armor break, using vulnerability, using dulled senses to reduce the enemy's stats while you are at 120% of those caps. If you're less than that, of course, it's still beneficial, but you can at least use it while you're capped out to still gain a damage boost, which is important to note. Other than that, they made Mystic Bolt now be able to critically hit. Some older achievements have had their criteria updated. As we mentioned with the Wondrous Bazaar, a bunch of additions there, and they supposedly adjusted Divine Aegis and Battle Temper to have their shields values updated. When we look at the tooltip, it now says you generate a shield on yourself and your target equal to 0.45% of the affected character's maximum hit points. This effect may stack up to 20 times, lasting 10 seconds. So the total amount of shield should just be 9% of your target's hit points, with then Battle Tempered getting the same treatment. It now creates a shield up to 0.9% of your maximum hit points, stacking up to 20 times. So you should be able to get a shield up to 18% of your maximum hit points. Quickly checking that here, while we attack our target, you can see we indeed gain that shield and those stacks, and it should be around again 18% of our max hit points, which seems about right. Honestly, that's a pretty good improvement because before it relied basically on your heal stats, which were pretty poor on a damage dealer. Now it doesn't matter at all. You can have terrible stats and it will always give the same amount of shield. And the more hit points your target has, the more shield they will get, meaning Divine Aegis should be a lot better at shielding tanks than it was before. There were also some updates to the new items coming with Module 30. Some notable examples are the weapons now have their tooltip corrected to say they're giving power instead of base damage. For some reason, the helmet for DPS got nerfed down to 9% total instead of 10%. And then what were damage rings now give 5% power instead of like 4% damage. And this 5% power is only within the Pirate Skyhold and the Dread Sanctum. It's 2.5% out of that. So they're somewhat useful to cap your stats, but you don't need them to cap your stats. The Raptor gives you more than enough power. Other than that, I didn't see any big changes. There were some boon fixes with Life Lessons and Bloodlust. I went then and checked the damage of those, and we can see in this example, Life Lessons was about 38,000 DPS, and with basically the same test, but with a little bit less gear, Life Lessons was at like 17,000 DPS. So even considering, sure, the power spike that I've gained, 1.9 million encounter DPS versus basically 7, we can still see the damage has basically doubled on life lessons. It now will crit much more reliably versus before was sometimes even like 0% of the time. It was completely wacky, but yeah, now it will be a lot more reliable. Bloodlust got a little bit updated as well. It should also trigger more consistently. Both of those you'll use anyway, regardless of what updates they've done to it. They just seem to have increased the damage a bit. They did do some updates to the new dungeon with bug fixes and balance updates. We then have with the rogues, they just like standardized Path to the Blade, so it can now properly trigger weapon enchantments. This should be the same as the Warlock's Vanquished Armies. And then with the Barbarian, also with their Punishing Charge and Savage Advance, they'll also trigger combat enchantments. But then we get into the bulk of Warlock updates. So pretty big change with Soul Sparks again. So now every time you attack your target, you're going to generate Soul Sparks. But they went and removed the additional Soul Sparks gained through at-wills to basically balance that. But it does mean it's better because now your encounter powers can generate Soul Sparks. And if you're using primarily encounter powers with this cooldown recovery, then you'll be gaining substantially more Soul Sparks than you were with their previous change, which made it so that basically only at-wills gave Soul Sparks. There was also a significant improvement to Curse. Basically now every time you put a curse on your target, they're also going to allow you to grant combat advantage against them, which frees you up from having to use No Pity No Mercy. It's now a basic feature on Hellbringer to always gain combat advantage against your target whenever you put curse on them. If you gain, say, this ability, you'll put curse on them with your at-wills, meaning as soon as you hit them, you now have combat advantage against them, which is actually really great for multi-target damage on Warlock. It's a decent improvement, but it's not that significant when you consider, yes, you could have just used No Pity No Mercy, and whenever you critically hit on them, you gain that combat advantage effect. But now at least, every time you're cursing them, you know for sure you have combat advantage against them. Removing the curse will not remove the combat advantage effect, but the initial hit which applies the curse does not actually gain the combat advantage damage bonus. Moving on from there, the Soul Puppet got a significant damage improvement, the magnitude gone up to 60, and now Soul Investor can improve that up to 90. Hellish Rebuke, just a bit of a change with the Soul Sparks like the other at-wills, but yeah, it will now generate 1 Soul Spark per hit, and then damage over time is 1 Soul Spark per hit. Haddar's Grasp now can trigger combat enchantments properly and gain Soul Sparks. Infernal Spheres now tagged as retaliate damage and will not trigger like enchantments or other reflect retaliate effects. Siphon and Daily Power, there's a known issue that the second hit doesn't properly trigger enchantments yet, and Brood of Haddar, pretty much same story. And Brood of Haddar also now generating a Soul Spark and triggering enchantments, but the multi-target attack won't trigger enchantments yet or trigger Soul Sparks. On from there, we have the daily powers, just some minor adjustments there too, but then a rework to Flames of Empowerment class feature. Before it gave you like 3% damage to your class abilities, now it's going to give you 2% damage to your class abilities and cause the target to take 2% increased damage. So you can use it as a bit of a support effect. Very minor, but it's a little bit that will help your entire team, anybody who attacks that target. They changed Dark One's Blessing so that you're going to gain Soul Sparks when you enter combat or upon a kill, but once every 10 seconds. So that's just gaining 6 Soul Sparks. Before it was on kill only, now it's going to be also when you enter combat. Can be somewhat useful in multi-target here. Then your Deadly Curse class feature now applies a separate damage source and can critically strike, and your No Pity No Mercy will no longer grant combat advantage critical hit, but that effect has been moved to Curse as we already discussed. Then your Dark Prayers class feature will now grant a Soul Spark whenever your Soul Puppet hits a target. And then your feats. Your damage bonus has gone up to 15% whenever they're cursed, and it only affects your powers. Risky Investment feat, the damage now will no longer be multiplicative, but it is still a 20% damage increase, and then the stacks for any further soul investiture you gain will be plus 2%. So as soon as you gain 1 soul investiture, you gain a 20% damage boost. And from there, you can get 2% per stack. That's a significant reliability improvement, also meaning it's not so important to stack soul investiture. You will at least have that decent boost at the beginning. But it not being multiplicative is quite a big damage hit when you look at burst. Then the soul desecration feat, the damage of your soul puppets now gone boosted up to 100%. So you'll basically get 180 magnitude per hit on your puppet rather than just 90. And that is ultimately all of the changes so far there. They may very well be making more improvements as we go along. Just keep yourself updated, especially if you're playing Warlock, and don't be too surprised when all of these changes are landing on your plate with module 30. There are definitely some things you'll want to change with regards to how you play. At least in multi-target, they have gone and improved significantly the effect of Curse Bite, which improves then the feat that can go with it. And that's because the cooldown reduction from Soul Spark Recovery can now actually reduce the cooldown of that ability, whereas before it didn't. And in single target, you may very well be better off with just Wrathful Souls. It does create a lot more basic playstyle than before, where you're just using your powers when they come off cooldown, and then using Soul Scorch as basically another encounter power, which does make it a pretty, again, basic class, because you won't really have to do animation cancelling, and you won't be, say, timing your abilities as much as you'll need to if you're using, like, the cooldown reduction. But again, we'll get into more details of exactly what rotations you want to be using later on, when they have more finalized the state of Warlock. As far as we know, they are still working on more changes with that. They'll look at testing and maybe tweak these changes further, depending how the balance is. Overall, I don't see Warlock having actually gained that much of an improvement in damage output compared to what it was before in single target. It's got a decent bit of improvement in multi-target. They've mainly just gone and fixed some bugs and standardized some abilities to work properly. And they definitely messed around quite a bit with Soul Spark Recovery on what they wanted to do with that. We can probably expect module 30 on November the 19th, as they seem to have changed the date from the battle pass on the calendar on the preview server to that, rather than previously, as we were saying, on November the 12th. So it seems to have been pushed back a bit, which works because the Volcanic Visions Battle Pass Last Chance is up until November the 19th. But yeah, thanks all for watching. A massive thank you to all these channel members for your extra support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.